Chapter 3, nearly 11:15. There's a mouse in here with me. He's sitting there in the light of the lamp looking up at me. He seems as surprised to see me as I am to see him. There he goes. I can still hear him, scurrying about somewhere under the hay rack. I think he's gone now. I hope he comes back. I miss him already. Grandma Wolf hated mice. She had a deep fear of them that she could not hide, so Charlie and I had lots to smile about in the autumn when the rain and the cold came and the mice decided it was warmer inside and came to live with us in the cottage. Big Joe loved the mice. He'd even put out food for them. Grandma Wolf would shout at him for that and smack him, but Big Joe could never understand why he was being smacked, so he went on feeding the mice just as he had before. Grandma Wolf put traps down, but Charlie and I would find them and spring them. All that autumn, she only ever managed to catch one. That mouse had the best funeral any mouse ever had. Big Joe was chief mourner, and he cried enough for all of us. Molly, Charlie, and I dug the grave, and when we laid him to rest, Molly piled the grave high with flowers and sang, "What a friend we have in Jesus." We did all this at the bottom of the orchard, hidden behind the apple trees, where Grandma Wolf could not see or hear us. Afterwards, we sat in a circle around the grave and had a funeral feast of blackberries. Big Joe stopped crying to eat the blackberries, and then, with blackened mouths, we all sang "Oranges and Lemons" over the mouse's grave. Grandma Wolf tried everything to get rid of the mice. She put poison down under the sink in the larder. We swept it up. She asked Bob James, the wart charmer from the village with the crooked nose, to come and charm the mice away. He tried, but it didn't work. So in the end, in desperation, she had to resort to chasing them out of the house with a broom. But they just kept coming back in again. All this made her nastier than ever towards us. But for Charlie and me, just to see her frightened silly and screeching like a witch was worth every single smack that she gave us. In bed at night, our Grandma Wolf's story was changing every time we told it. Now, the Colonel and Grandma Wolf didn't have human children at all. Instead, she gave birth to giant mice children, all of them with great long tails and twitchy whiskers. But after what she did next, we decided even that horrible fate was too good for her. Although Grandma Wolf did smack Molly from time to time, it soon became obvious that she liked her a great deal better than the rest of us. There were good reasons for this. Girls were nice, Grandma Wolf would often tell us, not coarse and vulgar like boys. Besides, she was good friends with Molly's mother and father. They lived as we did, in a cottage on the Colonel's estate. Molly's father was groom up at the big house. They were proper people, Grandma Wolf told us. Good, God-fearing people who had brought their child up well, which meant strictly. And from what Molly told us, they were strict too. She was forever being sent to her room, or strapped by her father for the least little thing. She was an only child of older parents, and, as Molly often said, they wanted her to be perfect. Anyway, it was a good thing for us that Grandma approved of her family, otherwise I'm sure she would have forbidden Molly to come and see us. As it was, Grandma Wolf said Molly was a good influence, that she could teach us some manners and make us a little less coarse and vulgar. So thank goodness, Molly kept coming home with us for tea every day after school. Not long after the mouse's funeral, it was Big Joe's birthday. Charlie and I had got him some humbugs from Mr. Bright's shop in the village, which he always loved, and Molly bought him a present in a little brown box with air holes in it, and elastic bands round it. While we were in school, she kept it hidden in the shrubs at the bottom of the schoolyard. It was only because we pestered her that she showed us what it was as we were walking home. It was a harvest mouse, the sweetest little mouse I ever saw, with oversized ears and bewildered eyes. She stroked him with the back of her finger, and he sat up for her in the box and twitched his whiskers at us. She gave him to Big Joe after tea, down in the orchard, out of sight of the cottage, well hidden from Grandma Wolf's ever-watchful gaze. Big Joe hugged Molly as if he'd never let her go. He kept the birthday mouse in his own box and hid him away in a drawer in his bedroom cupboard. He said it would be too cold for him outside in the woodshed with all his other creatures. The mouse became his instant favourite. All of us tried to make Big Joe understand that he mustn't ever tell Grandma Wolf, that if she even knew, she'd take his mouse away and kill it. I don't know how she found out, but when we came home from school a few days later, Big Joe was sitting on the floor of his room, sobbing his heart out, his drawer empty beside him. Grandma Wolf came storming in, saying she wasn't going to have any nasty, dirty animals in her house. Worse still, so that he'd never bring any of his other animals into the house, She'd got rid of them all. The slow worm, the 2 lizards, the hedgehog. Big Joe's family of animals were gone, and he was heartbroken. Molly screamed at her that she was a cruel, cruel woman, and that she'd go to hell when she was dead, and then she ran off home in tears. That night Charlie and I made up a story about how we'd put rat poison in Grandma Wolf's tea the next day and kill her. We did get rid of her in the end too, but thankfully without the use of rat poison. Instead, a miracle happened. A wonderful miracle. First, the Colonel's wife died in her wheelchair, so we didn't have to push her into the lake after all. She choked on a scone at tea time, and despite everything Mother did to try and save her, she just stopped breathing. There was a big funeral, which we all had to go to. She had a shining coffin with silver handles piled high with flowers. The vicar said how loved she was in the parish, and how she'd devoted her life to caring for everyone on the estate, all of which was news to us. Afterwards, they opened up the church floor and lowered her into the family vault, while we all sang Abide With Me. And I was thinking that I'd rather be in Father's simple coffin and buried outside where the sun shines and the wind blows, not down in some gloomy hole with a crowd of dead relatives. Mother had to take Big Joe out in the middle of the hymn because he had started singing Oranges and Lemons again very loudly, and he would not stop. Grandma Wolf bared her teeth at us, as wolves do, and furrowed her brow in disapproval. We didn't know it then, but very soon she would disappear almost totally from our lives, taking all her anger, all her threats, and all of her disapproval with her. So suddenly, joy of joys, Mother was back home with us again, and we hoped it was only a question of time before Grandma Wolf moved back up to the village. There was no job for Mother any more at the big house, no lady to be a maid to. She was home, and day by day she was becoming her old self again. There were wonderful blazing arguments between her and Grandma Wolf, mostly about how Grandma Wolf treated Big Joe. Mother said that now she was home she wouldn't stand for it any more. We listened to every word, and we loved every moment of it. But there was one big shadow over all this new joy. We could see that with Mother out of work and no money coming in, things were going to become desperate. There was no money in the mug on the mantelpiece, and every day there was less food on the table. For a while we had little to eat but potatoes, and we all knew perfectly well that sooner or later the Colonel would put us out of the cottage. We were just waiting for the knock on the door. Meanwhile, we were also becoming very hungry. It was Charlie's idea to go poaching. Salmon, sea trout, rabbits, even deer, if we were lucky, he said. Father had done a bit of poaching, so Charlie knew what to do. Molly and I would be on lookout. He could do the trapping or the fishing. So at dusk or dawn, whenever we could get away together, we went off poaching on the Colonel's land, in the Colonel's forests, or in the Colonel's river, where there were plenty of sea trout and plenty of salmon. We couldn't take Big Joe because he could start singing at any time and he would give us away. Besides, he told Mother everything. We did well. We brought back lots of rabbits, a few trout, and once a 14-pound salmon. So now we had something to eat with our potatoes. We didn't tell Mother we'd been on the Colonel's land. She wouldn't have approved of that sort of thing, and we definitely didn't want Grandma Wolf knowing, because she'd certainly have gone and reported us to the Colonel at once. "My friend the Colonel," she called him. She was always full of his praises, so we knew that we had to be careful. We said we'd caught our rabbits in the orchard and the fish from the village brook. The trout you could catch there were only small, but they didn't know that. Charlie told them that the salmon must have come up the brook to spawn, which they did do, of course. Charlie always lied well, and they believed him, thank God. Molly and I would keep watch while Charlie set the traps or put out the nets. Lambert, the Colonel's bailiff, may have been old, but he was clever, and we knew he'd let his dog loose on us if he ever caught us at it. Late one evening, sitting by the bridge with Charlie busy at his nets downstream, Molly took my hand in hers and held it tight. "I don't like the dark," she whispered. I had never been so happy. When the Colonel turned up at the house the next day, we thought it must be either because we'd been found out somehow, or because he was going to evict us. It was neither. Grandma Wolf seemed to be expecting him, and that was strange. She went to the door and invited him in. He nodded at Mother and then frowned at us. Grandma Wolf waved us outside as she asked the Colonel to sit down. We tried eavesdropping, but Big Joe was no good at keeping quiet, so we had to wait until later to hear the worst. As it turned out, the worst was not the worst at all, but the best. After the Colonel had gone, Grandma Wolf called us in. I could see she was puffed up with self-importance, aglow with it. Your mother will explain, she declared grandly, putting on her bonnet. I have to get up to the big house right away. I've got work to do. Mother waited until she'd gone and could not help smiling as she told us. Well, she began, you know some time ago your great aunt used to work as housekeeper up at the big house? And then she got kicked out by the Colonel's wife, said Charlie. She lost her job, yes, Mother went on. Well, now the Colonel's wife has passed away, it seems the Colonel wants her back as a live-in housekeeper. She'll be moving up to the big house as soon as possible. I didn't cheer, but I certainly felt like it. What about the cottage? Charlie asked. Is the old duffer putting us out then? No, dear, we're staying put, Mother replied. He said his wife had liked me and made him promise to look after me if ever anything happened to us. So he's keeping that promise. Say what you like about the Colonel, he's a man of his word. I've agreed I'll do all of his linen for him and his sewing work. Most of it I can bring home, so we'll have some money coming in. We'll manage. Well, are you happy? We're staying put. Then we did cheer, and Big Joe cheered too, louder than any of us. So we stayed in our cottage, and Grandma Wolf moved out. We were liberated, and all right with the world again. For a while at least. Both of them being older than me, Molly by 2 years and Charlie by 3, they always ran faster than I did. I seem to have spent much of my life watching them racing ahead of me, leaping the high meadow grass, Molly's plaits whirling about her head and their laughter mingling. When they got too far ahead, sometimes I felt they wanted to be without me. I would whine at them to let them know I was feeling all miserable and abandoned, and they'd wait for me to catch up. Best of all, Molly would sometimes come running back and she would take my hand. When we weren't poaching the Colonel's fish or scrumping his apples, more than anything, we all loved the danger of it, I think. We would be roaming wild in the countryside. Molly could shin up a tree like a cat, faster than either of us. Sometimes we'd go down to the riverbank and watch the kingfishers flash by, or we'd go swimming in Oakmont Pool, all around by the willows. I'll try that again. Or we'd go swimming in Oakmont Pool, hung all around by willows, where the water was dark and deep and mysterious, and where no one ever came. I remember the day Molly dared Charlie to take off all of his clothes, and to my amazement he did. Then she did, and they ran shrieking and bare-bottomed into the water. When they called me in after them, I wouldn't do it, not in front of Molly. So I sat and sulked on the bank and watched them splashing and giggling, and all the while I was wishing I had the courage to do what Charlie had done, wishing I was with them. It was several days before they managed to entice me in. Molly stood waist-deep in the river and put her hand over her eyes. "Come on, Tomo," she cried. "I won't watch, promise." And not wanting to be left out yet again, I stripped off and made a dash for the river, covering myself as I went, just in case Molly was watching through her fingers. After I'd done it that first time, it never seemed to bother me again. Sometimes, when we tired of all the frolicking, we'd lie and talk in the shallows, letting the river ripple over us. Oh, how we talked. Molly told us once that she wanted to die right there and then, that she never wanted tomorrow to come, because no tomorrow could ever be as good as today. "I know," she said, and sat up in the river, and then collected a handful of small pebbles. "I'm going to tell our future. I've seen the gypsies do it." She shook the pebbles around in her cupped hands, closed her eyes, and then scattered them out onto the muddy shore. Kneeling over them, she spoke very seriously and slowly, as if she were reading them. "They say we'll always be together, the three of us, forever and ever. They say that as long as we stick together, we'll be lucky and happy." Then she smiled at us. "And the stones never lie," she said, "so you're stuck with me." For a year or two, Molly's stones proved right, but then Molly got ill. She wasn't at school one day. It was the scarlet fever, Mr. Munnings told us, and very serious. Charlie and I went up to her cottage that evening after tea with some sweet peas Mother had picked for her, because they smell sweeter than any flower she knew, she said. We knew we wouldn't be allowed in to see her, because scarlet fever was very catching, but Molly's mother did not look at all pleased to see us. She always looked grey and grim, but that day she was angry as well. She took the flowers with scarcely a glance at them, and told us it would be better if we didn't come again. Then Molly's father appeared from behind her, looking gruff and unkempt, and told us to be off, that we were disturbing Molly's sleep. As I walked away, all I could think of was how unhappy Molly must be living in that dingy little cottage with a mother and a father like that, and how trees fall on the wrong side. Try that one again. Sorry. All I could think of was how unhappy Molly must be living in a dingy little cottage with a mother and father like that, and how trees fall on the wrong fathers. We stopped at the end of the path and looked up at Molly's window, hoping that she would come and wave at us. When she didn't, we knew that she must be really ill. Charlie and I never said our prayers at all anymore, not since Sunday school, but we did now. Kneeling side by side with Big Joe, we prayed each night that Molly would not die. Joe sang, "Oranges and lemons," and we said, "Amen," afterwards. We had our fingers crossed too, just for good measure.